Skip to cold relief fast. Alka-Seltzer Plus Power Max Gels with 25% more concentrated power.
Good evening and welcome to this News Center Maine Voice of the Voters special report, Conversations with the Candidates. I'm Pat Callahan. Our focus tonight is on the race for Congress in Maine's 2nd District. And here's the reason for tonight's format rather than our usual voter forum. The Democratic candidate, Congressman Jared Golden, and his campaign declined our invitation for either an in-person or a virtual meeting with his opponent, Republican Dale Crafts. So we spoke individually with each candidate last week to get their thoughts on a variety of topics facing Congress. Each will also have 1 minute to address voters at the end of the half hour. We begin with the challenger, Republican Dale Crafts. Dale Crafts, thanks for being with us this evening. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Pat. Appreciate it.
There have been photos from campaign events that you've been at, for example, with Donald Trump Jr., of people gathered together, not physically distancing, not wearing masks. With the outbreak at the White House, does it change your thinking at all about that kind of gathering and behavior?
Well, I tell you what happened there. We had an event. We had masks. We had hand sanitizer. We made sure everybody was, and then at the end of the event, people wanted pictures. The next thing you know, and it was 54. There was 4 over, right? But it's interesting that the governor has now made it up to 100, and a lot of that's changed. Bars are going to open, So yes, we didn't. When somebody said, "Oh, there was 54 in there," so all of a sudden, the event's over. People wanted pictures, and it just came up. And
so it just kind of happened.
It kind of just happened.
But I mean, do you think is the administration sending the right message right now about keeping people safe and healthy?
Well, we need to send the right message. I think that certainly this is probably, the president getting the coronavirus has got to be an experience that a lot of us haven't experienced. And
hope we don't.
Hey, look, we got to be safe. There's no question. We need to do all we can. My message has been from the beginning basically is there has to be a balance between how much economy we shut down, people that are vulnerable like elderly or people with pre-existing conditions or people that have health issues. We need to make sure, especially with them people. So that balance is the tough part.
Now, when it comes to pandemic relief, most people agree there's something needs to be done here. Have you got any thoughts about what you would support if you were in Congress right now? And do you worry about how it adds to the debt?
I do worry about the debt. That's very, very disturbing for me. I went on the campaign trail. I was talking about that before this hit. Like, okay, I don't, the deficit, in this economy, the money's, they're bragging about how much money's coming in, and we still had $1 billion budget deficit. That's very disturbing. So yes, but then again, we have to look at how we're spending our money. We got to protect people and come up and educate people. I think the government's job is to really tell people how to be safe, continue the research, come up with better ways to safeguard ourselves. And so I'm all for putting money towards that. I think we need to.
Let's talk a little bit about police reform. And we'll leave aside the defund the police argument.
Sure.
That's a kind of a catchphrase.
Yeah.
But are there things that Congress ought to be doing to say this can improve training, or this is a better use of money on the equipment that you buy, maybe not use so much military gear, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think I saw the leader Kevin McCarthy's come out with a plan where he wants to really make sure that across the nation, these towns and cities that can't afford cameras for all the police officers, that we ought to make sure that that takes place. I agree with that. More training. They're willing to put more training behind police officers. I wouldn't want to be in that situation where it's a life and death thing and you got to make a quick decision. I mean, and there's always a few bad apples. So, but we really need to focus on making sure that we do the very best with our law enforcement with the very best equipment we can have. I mean, that's really where we got to be.
The idea of forgiving student debt, forgiving government debt for student loans, it's a big burden for a lot of people in Maine. Is it a good idea that they should just wipe that out?
Okay, where's that stop? So what else are we going to wipe out, and who's going to pay for it? So, I think that we need to look at student debt. We need to look at the cost of what it costs to go to school. And that sometimes, I find that school counselors will send people off to university or college and highly recommend that when maybe they shouldn't be going off to college and end up with a debt that they can't afford, or get halfway through and not make it because it's just more than they can handle. I think a lot of that reform needs to be. I think we ought to have more trade schools and trade people, workforce training for that. But I can't just see just forgiving everybody's debt. I mean, I certainly understand some of these students. I mean, they're overburdened.
Is there a way to address that then without forgiving the debt? Or maybe I don't know what it is, but
No, why not come up with a way to work with people that have that debt so that they're not, that they can work their way through it. If there has to be more time, or we have to look at what they're being charged for interest rates, and just take a look at all that and try to reform that in a way that it works better than it does. But we just can't. I mean, look at the debt we have as a nation now. Are we going to add that on to the trillions of dollars worth of debt? This is probably not a good time for that right now because of the money that, we're printing or we're electronically.
That's right. The numbers are out there somewhere.
Yeah.
Are there any steps, if you're in Congress, that you would want to take to address the issue of gun violence in this country?
Well, you know what? It's interesting when you look at gun violence and you look where the gun violence is. I mean, you don't see that in Maine. You don't see people that have a really strong Second Amendment and people have the right to protect themselves and their family. You don't see as much gun violence. I mean, you take Illinois, Chicago. I mean, they have the strictest gun laws in the country, and look at the murders over there. So yeah, we need to look at why that's happening. And I don't necessarily think that the criminals ought to have guns and the law-abiding citizens should not have them. So I think that's an issue, but we definitely need to continue to look at that. This killing around our country in these cities got to stop, and we've got to find ways to stop. I mean, this is
no specific ideas that you thought might work?
Not really. I just think that it's more education, and I think that law enforcement ought to do a better job or have the resources to really look at why we're having these murders, why there's so much gun violence, and do a better job with it.
What would you support doing to try to address the issue of climate change?
Well, I always tell the story, and it's just one example of pollution or technology. When I grew up in Lisbon on the Androscoggin River, I used to drive across the bridge into Durham, and I remember the water coming over the dam, and it was like a foot of foam that used to float down. It looked like an iceberg, and so we had to start cleaning that up. That was man-made pollution, and so when it comes to climate change, I think there's a balance between is man caused all of it? Is it part of just climate change? And there's a lot of science going back and forth. So I think technology continue to improve, more efficiencies. I'm for all energies, but we need to have very clean energy as much as we can, and do our very best to make sure that we're not hurting the climate.
Republicans in particular have been trying for more than a decade now to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. Mm-hmm. The repeal part they've done somewhat on chipping away. We've yet to see the replace. What's your thought if the ACA is gone? What do you put in its place? Because there's a lot of people who depend on that help.
There is, and we got to have health care for everybody, and affordable health care, and a higher quality health care that's more accessible to all people. Listen, I'm in a wheelchair 37 years. I understand health care. And so people, you see an ad where I want to just get rid of it. No, I want to come up with a better health care program that's a free market-based system. Hey, when I was in the Maine legislature, we were fighting to be able to buy insurance policies over state line, and we couldn't get it done. Mm-hmm. So we got to create a better competition, and that way you get a better quality of health care at a lower price. And I believe that, but just to take it away from somebody and not come up with a plan, no, we got to come up with a plan. We got to make it affordable, and I'm always for helping the needy and the poor. So if we have to come up with a way to, help them to afford that free market health care plan, then we need to do it. But we don't need to take $160 million off the single payer insurance plan, because, Jared does support, he sponsored a bill, H.R. 1384, co-sponsored it, a $32 trillion health care plan for everybody to have government-run health care. I don't agree with that. That'll be a disaster, because everybody's going to lose their single payer.
I'll get a little philosophical for a minute. What are you proudest of in your life's work?
Well, I have an amazing family, and I got hurt 37 years ago, laid in that hospital, to be able to overcome my circumstance. I had one daughter. They said I couldn't have any more children. I had 5 more. I got 14 grandkids, and another one on the way, which is amazing. So I'm very proud of my family. They're all great kids and grandkids. They're all doing very well. They're productive in society. That's probably my greatest joy. To be able to start multiple businesses and hire hundreds of people over the years, and to give back to the economy, to create jobs, good paying jobs, I think that's been a big part of it. With my family, my whole family's created hundreds and hundreds of jobs, and so giving back. I served my town, I served my state, and you imagine I never thought 37 years ago, laying in that hospital bed, that I would be a candidate for Congress.
Not too shabby.
Yeah, so.
Finally, who's your political hero?
You know, the one that really inspired me, and people say, oh, that's another political story. No, it's true. I registered to vote. I graduated in '78, and I registered to vote as a Republican, and I voted for Ronald Reagan the first time. And you know, there was a time in our country where things were kind of depressing. And along came Ronald Reagan. He reduced taxes, and the economy boomed, and people were getting paid more money. People were getting better benefits from their employees, and we just saw a huge change. And we saw him take on communism and socialism. You know, I mean, it was a great time. You know, because the great hockey story. You know, during the Olympics. You know, so really, Ronald Reagan was an inspiration to Dale Crafts. Good. It really was.
And when we return, we'll continue our Voice of the Voter conversations with the candidates in the 2nd District and hear from the incumbent, Democrat Jared Golden.
Voice of the Voter on News Center Maine is sponsored by AARP Maine.
The pandemic has made everything harder. But AARP Maine is fighting to protect Mainers 50 plus by making sure you can still vote safely. We've gathered all the latest information about your voting options at our website. Find out what you need to know about early voting, voting from home, and voting in person, so you can make sure your voice is heard. Learn about your voting options at aarp.org/MaineVotes.
We can save the jobs by saving the businesses. That's our mission here.
What's important about Re-Up and the Sunday Supper is it brings a community of some of my favorite chefs together where we can all focus on trying to get some stimulus to the whole industry.
The reality is for restaurants, we are in a situation where the unknown is what's really frightening.
Help us survive. We'll be here for you.
Go to tastemaine.com for the Re-Up Maine Sunday Supper schedule.
At Subaru of New England, we're proud to be more than a car company. We are committed to keeping all animals safe and healthy. That's why during the month of October, we're partnering with 12 nonprofit animal organizations throughout New England for Subaru Loves Pets. By posting a photo of your best animal friend using the hashtag SNELovesPets, we'll donate $5 towards our goal. Love, it's what makes Subaru, Subaru.
Welcome back to our Voice of the Voter conversations with the candidates in Maine's 2nd Congressional District. Representative Jared Golden declined our invitation for an in-person or virtual face-to-face with his Republican opponent, Dale Crafts. So we spoke with each man individually, and here's our talk with Democrat Jared Golden. Congressman, thanks for being with us. Let me ask you first about the current COVID-19 situation and the leadership from the federal government. What are your thoughts on how well the administration has done here, and what should Congress be doing if there's any slack to pick up?
Well, the administration and Congress should be working together. That's, I think, the key point. Early on, I think things started out pretty good with passage of the CARES Act.
Yeah. Let's talk first, though, about the safety aspect, the idea that let's keep people healthy and safe.
Yeah, well, I think what matters is the dissemination of the most accurate information that you have. When you're learning about a new novel virus, something which I actually used to cover and talk about when I worked for Senator Collins on the Senate Homeland Security Committee, you're going to be learning as you go. So as you get the most up-to-date information, you got to get that information out to the American people, as well as to doctors and nurses and the people who are trying to take care of people on the front line. So I think that is one of the most important things, and I'd say that unfortunately much of the news and information about this virus has been politicized.
As we record this right now, we don't know if anything is going to be done in the next few weeks on pandemic relief, so we'll kind of leave that aside. But
well, on that point,
okay, sure.
I just got to say, I'm so terribly disappointed, and I don't agree with either the president or Speaker Pelosi or Mitch McConnell that this can wait. Congress needs to act on this. If they can't find agreement right now, it doesn't mean they should walk away from the table. The country cannot wait until next winter, the end of 2020 or early 2021, to take the next steps, whether that be vaccine development and investments, more money for testing, more assistance for businesses, for people who are unemployed, for our hospitals. The list goes on. And the idea that we're just going to set these talks aside until after the election, and do we really expect that to happen after in the lame duck session? I don't. I've been pushing very hard on this, and frankly, I think all three of them have failed the country in this regard.
Let's talk a little bit about police reform. The expression defund the police gets thrown around, and you've certainly pushed back on that. But are there things you think Congress needs to do, either in terms of changing the way police are trained or the equipment that the federal government gives them money to buy, for example?
I think that one of the key points is if you want additional training, that takes resources. So that is an argument that runs counter to the concept of defund the police. Better training means better prepared police officers and forces means more resources, not less. And I agree with that fully. Look at what we're doing here in Maine. There are some proactive steps that they've already taken in advance of 2020. Banning chokeholds unless deadly force is authorized. That would be a proactive step that we could take across this country. Essentially saying that this is a potentially lethal and dangerous technique that shouldn't be used unless you're already in a lethal force situation, where essentially the police officer is looking at their own safety and protecting their own lives, which they have every right to do when they're on the job. I think that having some kind of database system where if we have a police officer with a record of misconduct, that we should be able to share that across borders and across states, so that people that are have a bad pattern, a pattern of bad conduct and a bad record can't just move to a different state and get hired, which is something we've seen. The vast majority of our police officers are good men and women who want to serve their community, protect their community, implement the laws the way that they're supposed to be. But every one of them also says that accountability for bad cops is critically important, and that is one great way that we could accomplish that.
Let's talk about student loan debt. It's a real burden for a lot of Mainers, a lot of Americans. Some have talked about the idea of forgiving student loan debt. Is that a good idea?
Across the board, I don't think so. I don't know that that's the best investment that the country could make. First of all, I think we got to reconsider the current culture of almost educating kids that college is the only pathway forward to success. As I have gotten to know the 2nd District better and better over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, I would say that many of the best paying jobs with the best retirement and healthcare benefits actually don't necessarily require a 4-year college education, but rather specialized training, perhaps some additional education beyond the high school diploma. And yet, for the most part, I think the message remains in the school right now for high school age kids is that you have to make that 4-year degree investment, which continues to get more and more expensive. I understand, I think, the positive side of not carrying college debt. Mm-hmm. I served the country in the Marines, in Afghanistan and Iraq, and as a result I had education funding available to me. Not having that student debt has really allowed me to pursue different courses in life, or avenues in life, without thinking about that.
Should something like that be available if you do some other kind of public service, AmeriCorps or something like that?
Absolutely. I'm a part of a caucus called For Country, the For Country Caucus. It's a offshoot of a group called With Honor. These are all veterans, mostly of Afghanistan and Iraq, almost equally split between Democrats and Republicans. And one of our top goals is to increase public service, not just in service in the military, but in things like AmeriCorps, Job Corps, the Peace Corps. And one of the key things we've talked about is how do we get more individuals to choose this path early in life, and one of them certainly is a return. You give something to the country and to our communities, you get something back. And education, investment is a great, I think, return for that. Everyone gets a little bit of something.
The question of guns or gun violence is always a big one. What, if anything, do you think Congress could or should do to address the problem of gun violence as opposed to, say, gun control?
I think one of the first things that we should have a real conversation about is what are the emerging technologies in the world that are driving divisiveness, politicization, and pulling this society apart, putting people into corners with anxiety levels that are rising so high. Let's have a real conversation about social media and what people are being driven to view and what kind of bubble in world that they are existing in. It cannot be a coincidence that we've seen this rise in mass shootings, school shootings and other things at the same time that we see this rise in technology platforms that are being dominated in some really concerning ways. Go look at the Social Dilemma as an example of that, a documentary about this. Let's take the laws we have and really invest in them. Across the country, the background check system is under-resourced, understaffed, and not necessarily one silo not speaking to the other. That is one great way, I think, that we can keep all firearms out of the hands of a few bad actors, felons, dangerous individuals, people who should not mentally be in possession of a dangerous tool. But that is not the same thing as saying let's ban one specific type of firearm from all individuals.
What's your top priority that you think could get accomplished in the next Congress about addressing climate change?
I think we got to continue to speak to what our priorities are as a country. Up in Washington County, there's a developing potential for offshore tidal power generation. That's taken a lot of investment in partnerships, public-private partnerships between a private company in the University of Maine and with help from government funding. We got to test that out now, but if it works, then we got to take it to the next step, commercialize it, be able to manufacture it. Hopefully here in the United States, we have to be able to connect that into an old grid that really needs to be reinvested in. Like those types of little detailed investments in new types of cleaner energy that will help us get off fossil fuels is where government, I think, needs to stay focused. Investing in that laboratory that is our universities and partnering with states in the private sector to make these things affordable and so that we can scale them up is how we're going to get there. But at the end of the day, we have to be able to deliver the energy when it's needed. We can't put jobs at risk. We have to be able to prove that the technology works and works broadly to meet all of the needs of our entire society. So that's just one of many things. But with something like climate change, that's a big problem. There's not going to be one easy answer.
And after the break, we will wrap up our Voice of the Voter conversations with the candidates with their closing statements.
Up to the 2016 presidential election got it all wrong, right? Well, not exactly. What do those polls have in common with the almost undefeated 2007 New England Patriots? Polling 101 starting Monday at 4.
When faced with a diagnosis of cancer, the best place to be is close to home. Here at the Harold Alphons Center for Cancer Care, we provide the clinical excellence you can receive in major cities, but with the compassion that you expect from your neighbors. At Maine General, we're with you. We'd like to thank Charlie's family of dealerships for being a company that cares and giving our patients endless possibilities for their future.
Charlie's Motor Mall is proud to be a part of News Center Maine's Companies That Care.
This is a tale of two kitties. This kitty uses ordinary litter. This kitty uses Pretty Litter, the world's smartest cat litter, and it's delivered right to your door. Its ultra-light, super absorbent formula traps odors, and it does something no ordinary clay litter can do. Pretty Litter's color-changing crystals make it easy to monitor your cat's health, helping to avoid serious illness. She's switching to Pretty Litter. Smart move. Try Pretty Litter risk-free for 30 days. When you sign up, get free delivery. Go to prettylitter.com.
You're probably spending a lot more time at home these days, so when something goes wrong, it's a big deal.
For instance, my water heater broke recently. The AC went out.
The first time I'm leaving my son without me here, and now they don't have hot water.
That's why you need to be ready for anything.
I worked really hard to get to this place, so it's very important that I feel protected.
Having one little thing go awry in our life is devastating.
It's why you need First American Home Warranty.
I have the security of knowing systems and appliances around this house are covered for you.
A home warranty is for the everyday things that go wrong in the house. We have the Premier plan, which covers pretty much everything
Having First American is like having a handyman at my beck and call.
I went on the website and it took me 30 seconds to fill out a form saying what my problem was.
Thankfully, I'm enjoying nice warm showers again.
Protect your home and your budget with fast, reliable help.
I've easily saved $500 to $1,000 a year.
Everyday life depends on it.
Call now for a free quote.
800-719-7803. Welcome back to our Voice of the Voter conversations with the candidates in the 2nd Congressional District. We wrap up with 1-minute statements, beginning with the Republican challenger, Dale Crafts.
Hey, let me tell you about my American dream. You know, 37 years ago, I had a motorcycle accident, became paralyzed, and I had to look ahead to my life in a wheelchair. But you know what? The amazing thing is, you know, family around me encouraged me. My grandmother taught me to be an overcomer. I started multiple businesses, hired hundreds of people, created great jobs for people, and have successful businesses. And the amazing part, I have an amazing family with 6 children and 14 grandchildren, and live the American dream. And that's what I'm going to fight for in this country and for this state, especially the 2nd District of Maine, that, you know, they just know how to live and how to make it, and they know how to find a way. And so you'll find that I will protect your freedoms, your liberties, your Second Amendment right, and we'll always protect the First Amendment. Because remember, the Second Amendment always protects the First. And so we're going to just continue to work and be successful and look out for you and make sure that we create jobs for the 2nd District. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening tonight.
First thing that I'd like to say is that it has been an incredible honor to have had the opportunity to represent each and every one of you in Maine's 2nd Congressional District these last 2 years in Congress. And it has been a humbling learning experience. And I want to thank you for that opportunity. I'd also like to ask for your vote in support so that I can continue representing you for these next 2 years. First thing I want you to know is whether it's from my time serving in the military or serving in Congress, I understand what this job is about. It's about service to you. It's not about me, it's about you. That is my focus at all times. It is about constituent services. It is about listening to you so I have the strongest understanding possible about what the best vote for the community is. That's my commitment to you, that I will continue these next 2 years in Congress. I want to thank you for this opportunity, and I wish the very best to every one of you.
Now, the race for Maine's U.S. Senate seat continues to heat up. The State Chamber of Commerce and News Center Maine are teaming up for the Maine U.S. Senate debate on Thursday, October 22nd at 7 p.m. It will be one more chance before Election Day for you to evaluate the candidates in this crucial race. And it's a contest that could change the balance of power in the U.S. Senate. So don't miss this important event from the Maine State Chamber of Commerce and News Center Maine a week from Thursday. Thanks for being with us for this Voice of the Voter special report tonight. I'm Pat Callahan from all of us at News Center Maine. Good night.
Voice of the Voter on News Center Maine is sponsored by AARP Maine.
The pandemic has made everything harder. But AARP Maine is fighting to protect Mainers 50+ by making sure you can still vote safely. We've gathered all the latest information about your voting options at our website. Find out what you need to know about early voting, voting from home, and voting in person, so you can make sure your voice is heard. Learn about your voting options at aarp.org/MaineVotes.
Do you really know Sarah Gideon? She attacks drug companies, but invited drug company lobbyists to a fundraiser in her home. She was found guilty of illegally diverting PAC money for personal use. And Gideon supported raising taxes and fees 86 times, but her own family business repeatedly failed to pay their property taxes. Sarah Gideon tells you one thing, but does another, because Sarah is not for Maine.
I'm Susan Collins, and I've approved this message.
We can save the jobs by saving the businesses. That's our mission here.
What's important about Re-Up and the Sunday Supper is it brings a community of some of my favorite chefs together where we can all focus on trying to get some stimulus to the whole industry.
The reality is, for restaurants, we are in a situation where the unknown is what's really frightening.
Help us survive. We'll be here for you.
Go to tastemaine.com for the Re-Up Maine Sunday supper schedule.
I'm Hannah Deneen, News Center, Maine.
Dancing Man. The sea of supporters. Could this be the next Trump super spreader event?